Now, a few weeks ago, I shared a photograph of a design very similar to this on my socials. Everybody absolutely loved it. So if you want to learn how to do it, stay watching. So welcome back to today's video. If you haven't been here before, my name is Sharon. Welcome to my channel where we have lots of exciting videos on floral design. It's currently the spring, or supposedly the spring, here in the UK. It's still quite cold, and for the last couple of weeks I've been really showcasing what you can do with spring flowers, either from the supermarket or from your garden. Now, when I started this channel, it was aimed at beginner flower arrangers and those of you with an interest in floral design, and it has grown massively since we initially started. And this is the point where I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the channel, because 95% of the viewers aren't subscribed, so please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell if you want to be told every time I upload a new video. And let's get into today's design. Now, I am a commercial florist. I decided to create this YouTube channel when I realised that there were lots of people all around the world wanted to learn to arrange basic flowers. And today's design is a gorgeous one, and it's quite creative, but it just uses very simple flowers. So I'm going to start by showing you my mechanics, and my container is cream. It's looking a bit bright on the screen, but this is from IKEA. So anything that looks like a window box, long and low container is going to work. And you'll notice that the foam is below the level of the container, and that's quite important because I don't want a lot of fussy greenery at the base. That can sometimes be quite distracting. You might have spotted there's a bit of grey foam in there, and the reason for that is just to keep my two pieces of foam apart. I could have put in there a piece of fresh green floral foam, but I'm not planning on putting any flowers in the middle. I have this offcut to one side, and when I finish it, that's going to be covered in some moss. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a fresh piece of foam. It would have meant me soaking another block and wasting it because I'm not going to use it. But for today's design, you need the foam on the edges of your container, and it really suits a rectangle or a long container rather than something that's round. And what I'm going to do is create two placements on either side, almost like a parallel style arrangement, but we're going to link it together in the middle with some willow to almost create like a pathway through an archway or an arbour that you would have in the garden. So more of an interpretive style arrangement than a particular shape or a particular style of arranging. Right, so let's get started. In my garden at the moment, I have Spirea, and it happens to have this lovely curve, and I'm going to use that to start my outline shape. And I'm right on the end of the foam on what is my left hand side. The first couple of placements of flowers are going to look a bit strange because you probably can't visualize what I'm trying to achieve, but when it's finished, I'm going to link this together with some willow greenery. And what I want to do is make one side a bit more visually dominant than the other. So we have an asymmetric design, and I'm making use of those beautiful curves so that the shape is brought into the middle. And you'll notice that I'm right on the edge of my foam. I'm looking at the front. That's going to be the front for you. And then I'm going to reinforce that with some more twigs. You know, if you've been watching me for a while, that I'm a real lover of twigs. And I think in the spring, it just really epitomises what we're seeing out of the window. And I think we should embrace it. And if you're lucky enough to be able to forage for materials and go out for a walk and collect things, then it's a less expensive way of titivating your floral design. If you've got a garden, you might be able to pick bits and pieces from your garden. But for those of you that are sort of stuck without gardens, if you're allowed to forage, then go out and have a little look around. And I really did want to have one side slightly taller, but I haven't quite achieved that yet. That one's maybe going to raise the height up a little. So I'm still right on the edge of the foam. I'm going to bring a shorter display of flowers on this side and a taller display on that side. And that taller display is going to be with some irises. They're not quite open. I've had them a couple of days now, and I thought they would have been showing a bit more colour, but they're not. That's the sort of perils of my job, is that when you want something open, it's closed, and when you want it closed, it's wide open. So I'm going to make a cluster of the irises on this right hand side as I look at it, keeping them quite tall because I've got other flowers to come down at the base. But I'm thinking that this is not quite the natural way they would grow in the garden, because I have curved them slightly around those twigs, but they would grow up in a cluster from one section of the garden, so they would grow up quite naturally in a similar style to that. So probably a bit more perfectly arranged than they would be in the garden, but you hopefully get the idea. Then on the opposite side, I'm going to introduce some of the muscari. No, I'm not going to introduce muscari. I'm going to introduce some narcissi. It's a very similar word. I'm going to bring narcissi on this side because they are fairly tall. And these are supermarket ones. This time I've been in Tesco, and I'm going to do the same sort of pattern. So not quite as tall as the flowers on the opposite side, but I'm going to bring that nice little shape from one side down towards the base of my foam. Little cluster of them, not quite as they grow in the garden, but inspired by the way they would grow in the garden, maybe blown about a little bit in the Welsh wind. So nice cluster of those. And because I've got blue on this side, I'm thinking that a bit of blue on this side is going to give me a nice colour link. So, do I need any more? I think we're going to have one slightly taller one. Now I have cut these just in case you're worried. So, 2 groups on opposite sides. This one is slightly taller, so we have a more dominant side. This one is slightly shorter. And then in this area here, I'm going to introduce a sort of purpley blue hyacinth. And these are quite open. I've intentionally had them in a couple of days so that you can see what they look like when they open. It's much nicer than looking at flowers when they're still in bud. But what you sometimes find, and these admittedly aren't from the supermarket, but you can buy hyacinths in the supermarket, or you might have them in the garden. The beauty of these is they have a little baby one with them as well. So I'm going to tuck the 2 of those. If you find it difficult to get the soft stemmed hyacinth into your foam, insert a kebab stick or a cocktail stick at the base, and you get a bit of extra support while it goes into the foam. And I'm going to put 3 in a sort of group together, because 3 sometimes looks nicer than 2. This one is a little bit drooping forward, so I am going to insert a wire in the base. Luckily I've got some by my side. That's going to give a bit of extra support there and stop it bending forward. But the hyacinth, it's not a quality problem with the hyacinth, it's just that the heads get really heavy when they start to open. So that little head is going to work much better, but I think I'm going to make it a bit shorter. It doesn't quite fit in the gap that I wanted to go. There we are. So we have those pretty little display of very heavily scented hyacinths, which really fill a room with beautiful fragrance. Now my next flower is going to be a lilac-y purple tulip. Got a problem getting my words out today. So a lilac-y blue tulip, and I'm going to bring these at the back alongside my iris. I don't want to fill the centre gap in because I'm trying to create a visual archway with flowers on either side. Tulips got a mind of their own. They're not going to do what you want them to do. They're going to twist and turn. They're going to grow anything up to 4 inches after you've arranged them. So don't panic too much if you can't get them to sit where they want to go. Now I did have 5 and I seem now to only have 4. What on earth have I done with that 5th one? Right, let's get these in on that front section. I've spotted it. It's hidden amongst my daffodils just by here. So we've got a cluster now of those purpley lilac irises. And now I'm going to introduce some yellow daffodils. Now the daffodils are open, and I sometimes get slated on social media for using open daffodils. But the reason is for you to be able to see them clearly on the video, which you all understand, but you know, those people that like to troll and give me horrible comments like to say that my daffodils aren't going to last very long because they are open, and that's the reason why I'm using them, so that you can see them clearly on the video. So we've got a cluster of 3 on one side and then a cluster of 3 on the opposite side, and I'm hoping that we've got that nice sort of little garden effect taking place. Let's just slightly rearrange those heads so they're poking through. And this is how I imagine a really beautiful garden would look, where the flowers are coming up in clusters in amongst the shrubs and the bushes in the garden. To give me a little bit of visual contrast at the base and some contrast in colour, I'm going to introduce a little garden greenery. This is called Heuchera, and this one I think might be called Marmalade. It's a strange sort of apricot-y peach colour, but I thought it was a nice colour with my creamy container, and I'm hoping it's going to link quite nicely with my other colour combinations. And this is going to be really well placed at the base to give me some weight down at the bottom, just down there. And of course it's going to help cover that floral foam, which is really very important. Now if you're a keen flower arranger and you want to have some little plants for your garden, then Heucheras are really quite versatile. They come in a massive array of colours and they are really quite easy to look after. I cut them frequently to use in wedding work and video tutorials, and they come back in abundance. If I can look after them, anybody can look after them. I'm just going to try and squeeze one more leaf in there. And then on this side here, I've got some short pieces of heather. Again, it's a lovely garden plant. It's easy to look after. It doesn't like particular soils. It doesn't like my garden. I quite often get gifted heather when people are cutting their gardens back. But this is going to act really nicely to give me some ground coverage and to cover my floral foam. If you haven't got heather, it could be conifer, it could be little bits of pittosporum, pistache, eucalyptus, anything really that's going to give you some ground coverage. And then I've got another foliage from the garden, which you might recognise if you're living in the UK. This is elephant ears or begonia. And the reason I wanted to show you these was because this really vibrant sort of light spring green is the new growth. And you can see with this one, it's quite floppy. Whereas this one here is from the older part of the plant. It's a darker green and it's much more sturdy. Anything that's got light green foliage on it like this, at this time of the year can be really quite difficult to work with because it hasn't quite got the strength in it yet to be picked from the main plant. So if you have a choice, go for the darker ones. And in the autumn and the winter, you will find that the begonia will have this gorgeous brown, bronzy sort of colour leaf, and they can be used so well in autumn designs. But for today, I'm going to use the lighter green ones. They have been in water and they are going to last quite well in here, but they're not going to be as sturdy and stand as tall as the ones that have had a chance to mature on the plant. And I'm going to place these in at the back. It's going to give me a different shape and a different texture and a little bit more visual contrast. And I wanted this side to be a little bit more dominant than the shorter side on here, and I'll achieve that by using bigger leaves. Now what I don't like about these two daffodils here is they're facing in the same direction and they're fighting a little bit for attention. I'm just going to move that one so he's facing one way, and we'll move that so that he's facing the other way. and that hopefully will be a bit more pleasing. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to link the two positions together at the back by introducing some willow. Now the willow I've got is trailing or weeping willow that you will find quite often at the side of riverbanks, but I'm going to use it in sort of almost in reverse to create a loop over the top of my design and to create that sort of garden arch effect that I'm trying to create. Now willow isn't a good foliage to be out of water for any length of time. It's a plant that likes to have a lot of water. But what I'm going to try and do, and it's not going to come together straight away, but I'm going to bend a few pieces from one side to the other to link the two arrangements together. So if you can use your imagination and think that this is like a trellis work or an archway that's linked together in the garden, joining two sections of your border together. Can you tell I've got a bit of a wild imagination? I'm going to have to get a piece of wire in a minute just to hold it all together, but we're going to keep working on building up a bit of a framework and a bit of structure. Now again, if you don't like things that aren't symmetrical, then you're not going to like this at all because neither of the two sides are matching. But that's the style that I wanted to create. I wanted to create something that looked just like a miniature part of the garden. And I would be delighted if I had a section like this in my garden. And let's just add a couple more bits in. Now I've got to the stage where the glasses are going to have to come on, and I'm going to use just a small piece of florist wire. This is a 56 gauge reel wire, and I'm going to link all these little bits together in the middle. If you haven't got willow like this, it can be contorted hazel or twisted willow. But it's going to hopefully create a very rustic appearance to my arrangement. And I'm also going to reinforce it with some gorgeous contorted hazel. Now hazel is always the much thicker branch. Willow is the straighter one that has a bit of curve. And I'm going to add another one on the opposite side so they join together. And if you're not lucky enough to have something like this in your garden, this actually comes from a friend of mine. Every time she cuts the shrubs down in the autumn, she always leaves a big selection for me. She knows how much I love it. If you haven't got it, whoops, that just came out. If you haven't got it growing in the garden, then you can normally buy this from a florist shop. It's being a bit naughty now and it's not going where I want it to go. Let's try that again. And with a bit of perseverance, I got there in the end. Just going to introduce another piece of the bridal Spirea, just to bring a little bit more of the colour up to that side there. And I think I'm generally quite pleased. I have got Pussy Willow yet to go in. And this is going to extend the colour up and really reinforce those lines of the arrangement. Couple on this side and then a couple on the opposite side. You've really got to use your imagination on this one, because it's not a set standard floral design like we quite often learn on the channel, where we look at ovals or circles or triangle designs. This is something that's far more of a novelty sort of design. Take a step back, decide whether I need to change anything. I'm a little disappointed by the cluster of daffodils there, because they're all fighting for sort of attention. I'm just going to wiggle those around a bit to break up the group and move one down slightly. The only thing with supermarket daffodils is that sometimes they're quite short. But I think after lots of fiddling, I've got there now and I'm quite happy. I just need to add some moss at the base and then I'm pretty much done. Now, if you are watching this later on in the year and it's not the springtime when you find this channel, then you can do this quite successfully with some roses or some spray carnations. If you've got a clematis vine in your garden, that would work really well to create that trellis and that climbing effect at the back. And it would be something that you could do quite successfully at Christmas. You could run some lights, some fairy lights over the back and have it twinkling in your living room over the festive period. So I hope you've liked that one. I've already asked you to subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already done so, then please do so. Hit that notification bell to be told every time I upload a new tutorial. Thank you as ever for watching. Stay to the end so that you can see some close-ups of the design, and if you've got any questions or comments, pop them in the box below. And I look forward to seeing you for the next video. Bye for now.